Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for episode 8 of the Paralympian podcast. We have former Paralympic athlete Simon Butler with us here this morning. For those of you that have not met or spoke to me before, my name is David and I work for British Blind Sport, and I'll be hosting today's podcast. Firstly, if I could just all ask you to please ensure your microphones are muted for the duration of the podcast. This just sort of supports with any sort of sound or audio quality. If at any point in time you do wish to ask Simon a question yourself, you can do it of one or two ways. Firstly, if you were to raise your hand on the screen to the camera, I'll be able to, see that and then hand you over to Simon to ask your question. The second method in which you can ask a question is via the chat service here on Zoom. For those of you that are listening on Facebook Live, just pop your questions in the comment section and then I will ask those to Simon personally myself. So, good morning, Simon. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, David. Thank you for organising this, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for coming on. Welcome. Nice to see you all, and looking forward to your questions. And I'm an open book, so ask me anything.
Fantastic, Simon. I'm really looking forward to this morning, and again, thank you for joining us. So my first sort of question for you, Simon, for those of our listeners that are not familiar with your sporting background, could you please provide us with like a brief description of, what sport you competed in during your time as a competitive athlete?
Okay. I was mainly a track and field athlete. So my first competition, which was a big one, was the Paralympics in 1988 in Seoul, South Korea. So before then, I played football, played a bit of cricket. So I did visually impaired sports. And around 1987, 96, I'd say, a couple of years before, I started going to training weekends and started taking athletics a bit more seriously. And I was very fortunate to qualify and make the team. So my first international competition was the Paralympics in 1988. And from then onwards, for about the next 10 years or so, I competed in another Paralympics in 1992, as well as a number of Europeans and World Championships in track and field. So that was my main sport and my main sort of competitive athletics, in that time. And it was great. I did other sports on the side a little bit, but track and field was my main thing.
It must have been incredible to sort of be thrown straight into that international sort of spotlight and compete at the highest level. And we can touch on some of those experiences a little bit later, Simon. So I want to sort of take you back, as you briefly mentioned, around, some of your earlier memories and participating in other sports. So what is your actual earliest memory, from a boy of participating? I know you mentioned football briefly, but can you recall the first time that you sort of got involved and really found that love and passion for participating in sport and physical activity?
Well, I think from the time I was born, my mum tells a story that I was born at home on a Friday morning, and I came out. My parents weren't ready. We didn't have any chance for me to get to the hospital, and to get to the hospital, and I was born very quickly. And my mum says I've been running ever since. So, my earliest memories, I've got two brothers. One that's just older than me, one that's just younger than me. And I'm the only one that's visually impaired. I was visually impaired from birth. And my earliest memories of running about with my two brothers and playing with the other kids on the housing estate I grew up, and just doing sports. So kicking a football, throwing a ball around, running around, really sort of my earliest memories. From the age of 5, I went to a visually impaired school, and every break time, before school, after school, we were running around, kicking a ball. When we got a bit older, we were playing basketball in the hall, and just all different things about keeping active. So I think you know, being a sports person, being active is something that I was sort of always done and always enjoyed, and you know, from as long as I can remember, it was the main focus. You know, with regards to school, the main point in going to school was the break times and the after school and before school, and hanging out and doing stuff with the boys and girls.
It's truly incredible, Simon. And you know, you touched there on obviously the break times and participating in activities with your friends, and it just goes to show that sport is not just a competitive thing; it's also a very social thing as well. So, what I sort of wanted to do now was open up the floor to some of our audience here listening on Zoom to see if they would be interested in asking you a question. So for any of our listeners, if you are interested in asking Simon a question, you know, you can unmute yourselves or pop your message in the chat service.
Hi Simon, Darren Harris here.
Hey Darren, long time no speak. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. My question for you would be, you know, those early days that we used to have those sort of BBS events and BSAD events, how important were they? And, you know, what do you think the athletes coming through now are missing out on from not having those types of events?
Those events basically shaped my life, to be honest. So I joined, I left school at 16 and went to work. And quite soon after that, I joined Metro Sports. And from joining Metro Sports for blind and visually impaired people in London, they introduced me to the BBS events up and down the country. So from that led on to me training athletics and taking part in many different events. But it wasn't just that, it was the people I met up in Manchester or Scotland. And so I got to travel around the UK, which I hadn't done before that. So I got to see various parts of the UK, made friends all over the place. And it really, really made a massive difference to my life and, you know, the direction my life has gone in. So I think that there is probably less opportunity now for visually impaired young people to do what we did then. Is a shame. And, you know, I know BBS are doing a really good job in creating opportunities. But, and, you know, I think it is really important that young visually impaired people, blind people get the opportunity to take part in sport, try different sports and travel and see what they like and what they enjoy.
Thank you for your question, Darren. I hope that answered it. Simon, I believe that was a great answer. And, you know, some of the things that you mentioned there in terms of the aid and sort of the development it gave you through your younger years, could you please just explain a little bit more how, you know, sport enabled you to personally develop your skills and qualities in other areas, whether you're able to implement into other areas of your life?
Yes. So when I was, you know, I was always good at sport, and, you know, so getting out there and sort of showing that, expressing myself, you know, and then I suppose it wasn't so much the participation, it was, you know, the traveling and getting from A to B. It was getting on with people from a different background. It was, you know, when we started playing, you know, team sports like the cricket and the football, you know, I started taking a leadership role and being involved in you know, making decision making. So it was a lot of that type of things around the sport rather than actually the actual taking part and getting along with other people and you know, speaking up and getting used to just being a young person and you know, getting involved and our sport was very much we organised it. We did it, you know, other blind people were taking the lead in setting it up, doing the bookings and organising the equipment and the travel and setting up the fixtures. And, you know, over time I got involved in that type of stuff. And so that sort of really helps you develop as a person to take a leadership role and have a voice in how things are done. And so, you know, for me, it was a really big thing, and it sort of led to me looking to study. So I left school at 16 and went to work, but then I went back and studied a few years later, and ended up studying recreation management at university, and that sort of is what I've earned my living in and my career in. So it was sort of a big part in my decision making and looking at what shaped my future. So you know, I'm very, very grateful for that. So I hope that answers the question.
It certainly does, Simon, and it just goes to show that sport provides so many opportunities and pathways for, you know, young visually impaired people to, you know, achieve and do many other things in other areas of their life. We've just had a question submitted on Facebook from one of our listeners. It's from a gentleman called Armin, and he wanted to ask if you could just please explain what your eye condition is, if you didn't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, it was from birth. So I've got so high myopia, which is basically just severe short-sightedness, and I have about 10% vision. And I've also got a nystagmus, so that's the movement of the eyes and the head. So with regards to when my brain tries to focus, things moves, and to try and get an clear image, my eyes and my head moves. So like I said, it's from birth. It's been the same roughly all the way through my life. It hasn't really changed. And as I said, about 10% vision. So I can see enough to get around. I don't use a cane or a any other type of aid to help me get around. But with regards to looking at a typical chart at the opticians or ophthalmologists, I can sometimes see the top letter, and basically to look at things, you know, I have to go very close. So I can read print, but I read it up very close. So I spent my childhood with my nose on various bits of paper, newspapers, books, writing, and just looking at things and trying to sort of do things. You know, that's how I could sort of read and write, is to get very close to things. So for me to see any detail, I have to get close, and after a meter or two, everything becomes blurred. I hope that helps.
Thank you for answering that question for Armin, and that really does give us a real insight to sort of the challenges you may have faced. You know, and full credit to yourself in applying yourself to be able to better your education, which I imagine would have been very difficult at times, Simon. And the next question that I have for you, I want to take you back to your first international competition, which you mentioned was the 1988 Seoul Paralympic Games. Could you sort of explain to our listeners your memories and the emotions of how that sort of felt during that period in your life? Because it must have been incredible.
It was incredible. I was very lucky because before Seoul, the Paralympics Paralympics began in the 1960s for visually impaired people. I think 1980 was the first one, or actually maybe 76 was the first one. So it was still quite new then for visually impaired people, and some of the competitions weren't as well organised as they could have been. But 88 was a bit of a game changer with regards to what happened, the organisation, the venues, all the same venues as the Olympics, and crowds, and decent crowds, and everything else. So it was a big event, and it was a load of people there, and it was all very new to me, but I was so excited to be there, to be part of the team, to meet all the other athletes. And I would say that sort of my personality, I thrived on the challenge, very confident in what I could do. I've always performed best at international competitions, so I really liked the crowds. I really liked the pressure. I really liked the, you know, what it was all about. And you know, I was very grateful to have the opportunity, and I won a gold in the 400 meters, which was my main event. I won a bronze in the long jump, and I came fourth in the 100 meters. So those were my 3 events, and it was just wonderful being there. And part of it was meeting the other people from the British team. So the visually impaired athletes, there was a lot of swimmers, a lot of track and field athletes, and there was a global team as well. That's what I remember, meeting those, but also meeting the other impairment groups and the other athletes was wonderful. And it was just a great time, and really good competition, and a lot of fun memories.
It certainly is. And just hearing those achievements, really, for someone as a sports fan, I really admire what you've achieved. So as we're sort of moving on, you've obviously mentioned that you won some big medals at those Paralympic Games, and you weren't too far off in another event. But over the next 4 years, you competed in several European and World Championships. So could you please tell us how your training regime sort of was planned out in the build up to those events? Because I can imagine it was very demanding upon the body, and the psychological effect in getting through those tough sessions would have been very difficult at times. So how did you manage to sort of deal with that?
So I was either working or studying when in the build up to all my competitions. I've always worked or studied, as well as trained as an athlete, and I've had some fantastic coaches. Got to name them all now. So my first coach was Mike Forrest. He's a great guy from London. He was part of a club called Woodward Green. Then Keith Antoine, who was still involved in Paralympic sport, he was my next coach. Then after Keith, it was Jimmy Hogan. He was based out of Battersea Park in London. Wonderful coach. And then Keith's brother Les Antoine, when I moved to Bristol, he was based in Gloucestershire, and he was my coach. So working very closely with the coach on fitting the training sessions around work or studies was always important, and trying to get as much time seeing the coach as possible. So for track and field athlete, there's obviously time at the track and the technical stuff around sessions and whatever else. And just also to say that being a 400-meter runner, the sessions are hard physically and mentally. You have to really sort of challenge yourself to run 400 meters. Unfortunately, it was my best event, but because I wanted it to, because I chose to be, it's just what I was best at. So it's always best to do what you're best at. So that was my event. So circuit training, going to the gym, getting stronger, putting on sort of not really bulk, but certainly some muscle, some strength there. Building up your strength endurance. So running up hills was a big part, and running on different surfaces was on grass and other surfaces was part of the training. So really, I trained normally straight after studying or straight after work, an hour or two, normally 1 session a day, and at the weekend sometimes 2 sessions. And so that was really my sort of routine with regards to training. It's normally sort of between 4 and 6 days a week.
The commitment that you've just described to us there, Simon, is truly astonishing. To be working or studying full time and then having to take the time out of your mornings or your evenings to go and train. It's something I suppose many professional athletes today would take for granted, in the sense that they just get to apply all of their time and effort into their sports. And it does make me sort of think, how good could you have been if you were able to apply all of your time and effort into just your track and field?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for what I achieved and what I've done, and how much better I got with the coaching and the time that various people put into me. But I don't think I reached my potential, but I had a few injuries over the years as well. I also, I was not probably as committed as some, I would say. I was committed to being as good as I could be in the time I could give it, but other things in my life, like, you know, work, like socializing, like seeing, like doing other sports were important to me as well. You know, I was a bit of an all-rounder. So I think there's some athletes that they want to, you know, they focus totally on reaching that goal and being as good as they can be in that one specific thing. I worked really hard to be good at my events, but it wasn't the be all and end all for me.
It just goes to show, you know, the type of person that you are, Simon, that you're always striving to get better and achieve, and not just in your obviously your sporting career, but other areas of your life. Just before we sort of move on with some more of the questions that I have for you, I just wanted to open up the chance for some of our audience to ask some questions. Rosie, did you have a question for Simon earlier on?
Hi, yeah, I've got a different question now. Actually, I missed the beginning, so sorry if you've mentioned this already, but I just wondered what you do now.
Hi, Rosie. No, I haven't said what I do now. I work for charity, and I manage a sports project trying to get families more physically active. That's my sort of profession. That's what I do. With regards to sport, what I do now, I a little bit of exercise, not too much, but the main challenge I think what's important that as we get older, we challenge ourselves. And so I go cross-country skiing most years with a visually impaired group, either in Europe or in North America. And over there, you get a guide, and then you do cross-country skiing. Now, I'm never going to be the best cross-country skier ever, but I really enjoy it. You normally do a 5K or 10K or 20K race, and it's a lot of fun being out in nature. And so that's my main sort of sporting thing I do now each year. And I do go to the gym, I do a little bit of running, but not really majorly competitively nowadays.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Rosie. I'd just like to ask some more of our audience, and it looks like Clive may have a question for you, Simon. So, Clive, if you'd like to unmute yourself and proceed with your question.
Hi, Simon. It's Clive Spencer here.
Oh, hi, Clive. Oh, my Lord.
Long time no see.
I hope you're well.
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thanks. Yeah, say hello to Darren and Ying as well while I'm here. So hi to you folks. I was just really, there seems to be a sort of, you had the opportunity, you came through an era when there was opportunity to compete nationally before you went on to international events. And I wanted to ask you really how sad you are that there isn't that opportunity now to sort of come through, and we seem to have a dearth of, particularly with track and field, I suppose, athletes nationally. So how sad are you about that? And then have you any advice for youngsters who perhaps aspire to be international track and field athletes visually impaired?
So when I was coming through, we had the National BBS Athletics Championships, which was normally in the sort of Coventry and Nuneaton area. Metro ran an athletics championships every year. There was a competition in Manchester. There's even competition in Scotland sometimes as well. So there was a number of competitions taking place up and down the country that you could go to, that you didn't have to have any standard. You didn't have to be good at anything. You can go and try different events. There were some competitors who were well trained and very good, but also as a visually impaired person, you can just go along and take part in things. And that was a sort of starting point for me and many others. And yes, there's less opportunities, and it is quite a challenge to find opportunities for young visually impaired people, or even older visually impaired people who want to take part in track and field. What I would say is that mainstream clubs do try and do and can have open meetings and events that visually impaired people can go along and take part in. So that seems to be sort of one of the sort of ways forward for people nowadays and interested in taking part in sport. So at the highest level, we have obviously there's visually impaired athletes in the Paralympic team. Not as many as there were in my day, but there is a few, and the standard is extremely high. But getting to that standard takes a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, a lot of competition, a lot of trial and error, and it is very difficult. I think getting yourself involved with either a mainstream club or a visually impaired club that has got the right contacts with the right type of coaching that will help people to sort of progress and work hard and go forward seems to be the way forward. So I think it's more likely to be the mainstream route in getting involved. Track and field is a very simple sport, running, jumping, throwing, and you do need help, you do need guidance, you need extra time to learn the techniques as a blind or visually impaired person. But it can be done, but it does take a lot of effort and a lot of time, and and there is lots of knowledge up and down the country, and there's lots of people who are willing to give help and with lots of experience. So I would say that contact British Blind Sport. They can certainly help with putting people in the right direction and putting people in the right contacts. And there is blind people out there who could reach the highest level and get to go to Paralympics and go to events like I did and many others did, and it just takes a lot of work, and it does take a load of support and a load of the amount of people I've got to be grateful for is immense. It's just it was a great time, a great career, but there is people out there that are willing to help and support people coming through and to try and reach those highest levels. Thank you, Clive, for the question.
Yeah, thank you, Clive, for your question. A really great one there, and another great answer, Simon. So my next question for you, Simon, is sort of more of a reflective sort of question. So obviously, if you could go back in sort of time and look at your whole career here, if there was one single moment you could relive over and over again, what would you say that would be?
I'll give two answers. In 1992, I didn't win my main event 400 meters, and the reason why I didn't win, I should have won, according to myself, is they had the heats and the finals of 400 on the same day, and that never happens normally. And for some reason, it did happen in Barcelona. I don't think it's happened since or any other championship before. And I ran the semi-final and ran really well. I think I was second fastest qualifier, and I ran a 51 point for the 400, and it was fine. I was injured most of that year, and I was getting a lot of treatment all the way in Barcelona and pre-Barcelona. What I didn't do was go and see the physio between the semi-final and the later on that day, the final, to get some more treatment and to have a look and whatever. When it came to the final, didn't really manage. The body wasn't prepared, and I just crashed out and didn't really finish the race. So I like to go back in time and do the right thing and go and see the physio between the semi-final and final. So the one I'd like to always relive again is my first gold medal in Barcelona. Great, just being the whole culture of South Korea, different place, and being there again and reliving that moment would be wonderful. And just sort of on the day, I remember being on the track and preparing to run and setting up my blocks and taking in the whole atmosphere, and I was there doing anything, and then one of the officials came up to me and said, in a Scottish accent, which I'm not going to copy, he said, "You better win, Mr. Butler, or you'll not get on a plane back to the UK." And that was Brian Scobie, who was a well-known athletics coach and who did work for many years as an official with the International Blind Athletics Federation. And he was there sort of doing his role as an official, but he gave me a quick pep talk to do well on that day just before I ran, like 2 or 3 minutes before I actually got down the blocks and ran. So reliving that moment would be wonderful.
That's incredible. It's little stories like that often make the best memories, don't they? Yeah, I enjoy those little things, when you hear about dressing room banter in other sports, or particularly in this one here, just that obviously him coming up and just giving you a little message, a little joke, and it sort of maybe relaxed you, which enabled you to go out there and perform, I imagine.
I certainly wanted to get back to the UK, so I had to win.
Simon, we've had a question again on Facebook from Armin, and his question is, did you have a running partner, like a training partner, or, you know, did you have a guide that you ran alongside with very often at all?
So my category is the B3 category, so it's is it T12 or T12 or T13 now? Can't remember what it's called now, but it's a category with the most sight amongst the visually impaired events, that is totally blind, and there's some that can see from light perception up to a certain level, and my category is the one above that can see a little bit more. So when we compete, we compete basically the same rules as you'll see in a mainstream competition. Training is a bit different. Training is much harder. A lot of the training is done in the evenings, in the dark, and then, so what I would always do with my coach is the coach would say, the track is clear, you can run now. And so I couldn't see what was in front of me, you know, more than sort of 5 meters or so. So the coach would always say, the track is clear and you can go. A lot of the training in track and field is done in groups. So I'd run with a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people, boys and girls, men and women. And so the coach would say, go, and we all run down 50 meters or 100 meters or 200 meters or 300 meters or whatever. So you always run together. So therefore, you know it's going to be pretty clear ahead. And if there's anybody in the track ahead of you, hopefully one of the other people who I'm running with will tell the people to move out of the way, because obviously athletics tracks, when a lot of people training, can be quite busy. So I didn't have a specific training partner, but I did have other athletes that I trained with over the years in groups, and we did things together.
Thank you for providing that insight there, Simon. It's, you know, given some of our listeners a little bit more of an insight to, you know, the world of VI sport and the different categories that, you know, and that the athletes fall into. So I just want to offer sort of one final opportunity for our listeners to ask you any questions. So if anyone does have a question, I'd welcome you to ask Simon those. I think Ying may have a question for you, Simon.
Hi, Ying.
He's just trying to unmute himself, Simon, I believe. Here we go. Hi, Ying.
Hi, Simon. And hi, Mr. Spencer, and hi, Darren Harris. Can you tell me more about what your work is doing at the charity? Are you just basically organising things, or you are speaking to families directly?
Okay. So my job is I work for, it's a big national charity, and they do lots of different things. So they run schools, they do sort of community work, they've got food banks, we've got a youth service, we do debt advice, we do sort of healthy eating in schools, lots of different things. And my specific project that I manage is funded by Sport England, and it's to get families more active. So what I do is I organise activities, and we invite local families down to come and be active together. So the objective is to try and get the parents and the children active together. So the idea is that if the children see the parents active, they will have a sort of lifelong love of sport and continue to do sport sort of outside of the activities that I organise. So what I do is I set up activities, I employ coaches, book facilities, create the publicity, you know, set up, create, provide refreshments, to do all the risk assessments, set up lots of different things around organising activities and sort of getting people active, and working in partnerships with different organisations, working with the local councils around using the facilities, working with sports clubs around, sort of, we could be doing some cricket or some tennis or athletics or whatever with the families. So it's very varied, and it's it's whatever we think is the best idea that families would want to do and to keep them active. It's gone very well. I started in January this particular role, and quite soon after that, obviously we went into lockdown, and there's obviously various challenges. So we pivoted to do some stuff online, which went well. Did 15 weeks of online activity. Then fortunately, restrictions were lifted towards the summer, and we ran a summer program. So the stuff I organised in the summer, we had 63 families from the area I work in turn up to take part in activities. So yeah, it was great. It went very well, and yeah, I'm very fortunate to work in such a field where I can see the benefits to people, and getting people active is obviously good for their health, and the enjoyment that the families showed in the activities that we organised.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you for your question, Ying. Darren has just notified us that he has a question for you, Simon. So I'd like to invite Darren over to proceed with his question.
I don't like to hog the show, but I mean, a funny story about Simon, but obviously there's a question in there as well. But,
oh dear, I don't know what you're going to say.
Well, me and Simon were at the same university. Well, no, in the same city at the same time. And I do remember him in the nightclub on his crutches once, which was incredible. But I wanted to ask you if you chose Sheffield because of its sort of sporting pedigree, because it had the World Student Games in 91.
Thank you for that, Darren. I had offers from Loughborough, Sheffield and Staffordshire. I went to visit all three beforehand. When I visited Sheffield, it was definitely my number one place. I thought the facilities, the setup with regards to the campus, the course was what attracted me. Also, I didn't get the grades for Loughborough as well, so even if I got the grades, I think I still would have gone to Sheffield. Fantastic city, wonderful place to be a student, wonderful place for training. Lots of good facilities there, lots of good surrounding, like lots of good hills to run up and down. Lots of good people involved with the university, both universities actually. I went to Sheffield Hallam, but Sheffield University as well. And yeah, I broke my leg. I clean break through my tibia and fibula. I was in plaster for 13 weeks, but it wasn't going to stop me from, being active in lots of different ways. So, yeah.
It's a great insight to a little bit of some more comical stories there, yeah. Simon. It seems that there's a great character and personality that you have there. And we've just had another question from one of our Facebook listeners, and it's around sort of how to keep themselves motivated. And I think particularly with the world's current climate surrounding COVID, what sort of advice do you think you could give to, a young aspiring, track and field athlete in terms of how to stay motivated and keep training through this difficult time?
I would say that set yourself challenges, set yourself goals, love the process, love the sessions, love, weekly, monthly, quarterly challenges. It's important to sort of always look to progress, always look to get better, always look to work on different aspects of yourself and your sport. And I think for me, when I was competing, the goal was to get to be in peak shape for the championship. So it was a Europeans, a Worlds, or Paralympics. So the normally 10-month preparation, you sort of build up each month. Now, life is never perfect, so things get in the way, whether it's injuries, whether it's work, studying, you could have exams, or whether it's just a family situation or bad weather. All these things sort of come into play, but always sort of focus on the long-term goal, and always never get too upset or too up or too down. Just keep on sort of trying to build and work towards what the goal is. I would say also that when you're young, cherish it, because I'm now over 50 and I still have goals, I still have ambitions to compete and do well, but I don't have the same powers I had in my 20s and 30s, just put it that way. So I think to try and sort of maximize what you can do as an individual, it doesn't have to be on this sort of world stage, just in your local club or your local park run, or just challenge yourself to do a triathlon or whatever. Is important. I think challenging yourself is really important, and striving to sort of achieve what you can is really important. Being healthy and being active, I think, is particularly for visually impaired people, I think is really important, because we often have bumps and scrapes as people that don't see very well or don't see at all, and so being fit and being healthy and getting through those, which is a part of life, is the fitter you are, the more likely you are to sort of get over those quickly. And so I'd say it's very important, and probably more important, and even with regards to what the world has gone through now, challenging yourself and getting out there is really important, and just sort of work towards it and sort of keep on progressing and trying, and I think it's fun as well, and you get to meet people and travel and see different things. And like I said, even like nowadays, I ski every year, and I'm never going to be one of the best skiers. So the event I've been to in Norway, fantastic skiers from many different countries, much better than me. But I love going and trying to see if I can get around that 20k course. I'm naturally more of a sprinter than an endurance athlete, but I still enjoy going out there and doing that. And one of my sort of heroes, he's 96, and he still was in this year he was in Wyoming when I was in Wyoming skiing. Last year he was traveled all over from the States over to Norway, and he was in Norway, and he still competes, still skis. He's totally blind chap, wonderful fella, full of life at age, and still going out there and doing the best he can at his age. And I want to be like that when I'm that age. So I think always challenging yourself, always having a goal is a really important thing in life. And so yeah, just find something that you enjoy and work towards it, and keep on going.
Thank you for answering that question, Simon. Just before we wrap up today's episode, I'd like to offer that final opportunity for our listeners to ask Simon a question. So if anyone does have one, please feel free to unmute or submit a question via Facebook. Okay, Simon, it doesn't look like none of our audience have any other questions. It seems that we've sort of covered almost everything. So I firstly would like to thank you for your time and for answering everybody's questions today. I'd also like to thank for being possible without your support here today. For those of you that sadly haven't had the opportunity to ask Simon a question, if you did want to send them to myself via email, I can pass those on to Simon at a later date, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer them for us.
Absolutely, yes.
So thanks again, Simon, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. You've been a great guest and a real great ambassador for sport as well.